There's a lot of contractors out there that will tell you that you need to replace your ductwork in your home every 10 to 15 years. But is that really the case? And how long should ductwork last before you need to replace it?
Hi, this is Kenneth with Atlas AC, and at any point during this video, if you find it to be helpful, please hit the like button, and that will really help me out with the YouTube algorithms.
So there are three types of ductwork that is routinely used in homes. The most common type that we find in our neck of the woods is flex ductwork. So what flex duct is essentially made of is a foil cover, fiberglass insulation, a plastic liner with spiral wiring. Then we have ductwork made out of ductboard, which is the most uncommon style that we find in our surface area. So ductboard also has a foil cover, along with rigid fiberglass insulation and a microbial coating to help reduce microbial growth. However, older ductboard doesn't have this coating. And lastly, we have metal ductwork, which is still fairly uncommon, but you can still find it here and there. And metal ductwork is made out of galvanized steel with a fiberglass wrap and once again a foil cover. So each one of these will have a different life expectancy from one another, along with different pros and cons, which we'll jump into now. Alright, let's take a look at this chart real quick. In the first column you can see I have the age of the home. In the second column I have which AC system it is currently on. So in year 15 to 20, you're probably going to end up changing the AC system, making it the second system on this home. And the next column over, I have flex ductwork, and then after that, ductboard ductwork, and then finally, metal ductwork. So the first 15 years of the home, you shouldn't have any issues with your ductwork, whether that's flex, ductboard, or metal. Now I would recommend that every 5 years that you would have a technician go through all your ductwork to make sure that it's properly sealed, and if it's flex ductwork, to make sure it's all strapped up properly. This will help ensure that your system is running efficiently, so you're not cooling and heating your attic, making the system run a whole lot longer than it should be, which will also help ensure that you get the longest possible life out of your HVAC system, along with keeping everything as clean as possible. Now let's say the age of the house is now around 15 to 20 years, which is now approaching the life expectancy of an AC system. So you're considering getting it changed out, but what do you do with the ductwork? Do I need to replace it? Can I reuse it? In all three cases, you should be able to reuse your ductwork just fine. However, you still want to make sure everything is sealed, strapped, and clean, and that the existing ductwork is sized appropriately for the new equipment. So a lot of times, as a house gets older and older, it starts to lose efficiency. It's not quite sealed as good as it used to when it was brand new. The insulation is starting to collapse down a little bit, and the heat loads might call for a little bit bigger of a system. So definitely make sure that the sizing is correct so you don't end up damaging the new system that you're about to buy. Or sometimes in the construction of the home, we'll see some contractors cut corners in order to save a few bucks and install undersized ductwork. So proper ductwork sizing is one of the most critical components when you're replacing an AC system. In order to get the full life of the system and removing as much humidity as possible, along with maximum efficiency. And let's say the ductwork is slightly undersized. A lot of times all you have to do is replace the plenums, install a couple duct runs, or enlarge a couple duct runs in areas that you're having trouble with airflow. Then you can reuse the rest of your ductwork. That way you're not shelling out a lot of money on ductwork that's still good. Now if we look at the third row, where the home age is now in between 30 and 40 years old, and is approaching the time to change out the system for a third time, if you have flex ductwork, this would be the time period when you would start considering replacing it. Because the ductwork has gone through 30 to 40 years of hot summers, in some cases attics can reach up to 140 degrees, and we have a couple days out of the year where it freezes, so over time the ductwork just starts breaking down and starts becoming less efficient. It's also starting to get dirty inside, and I wouldn't use a duct scrubber to clean it at this point, because it could damage the ductwork. However, is it completely required to replace it at this time frame? No, I've seen ductwork last much longer than this. However, in this time frame, it's just a good rule of thumb. And that's because it could be starting to fall apart. It's not going to be as efficient as it used to be. It could have been stepped on, spliced into, cut into. It could also be filthy inside, and so on. Now, when it comes to ductboard, you should be able to get one more change out without having to replace the ductwork. And once again, you're going to want to make sure everything's sized right. If it ends up being dirty inside, you should be able to run a duct scrubber through it. And the downside of using a duct scrubber on ductboard is the inside is made out of fiberglass, so it could dust your home with fiberglass if you decide to clean it with a duct scrubber. And when it comes to metal ductwork, you shouldn't have a problem reusing it. And the beautiful thing about metal ductwork, you can run a duct scrubber just fine without damaging anything. However, a lot of times in this time frame, we will see the insulation wrap starting to break down. So you might want to consider getting it taped back up or replaced. And once again, you're going to want to make sure that the ducts are sized right for the new equipment. Now, when it comes to the fourth change out of the house, if my ductwork was made of ductboard, I would consider having it replaced at this time. It's just going to be old, probably pretty dirty, and falling apart. Now, when it comes to metal ductwork, you got to do the same thing as last time. Make sure everything's sealed, insulated, cleaned, and sized right. So I want to pause right here because whenever I'm talking about ductwork lasting this long, you also have to be following all the best practices. And probably the most important one is the sizing of the ductwork, because whenever we talk about ductwork lasting this long, we typically run into some issues. So if we simply go back 30 to 40 years, so let's say back in the 80s, home HVAC systems were designed completely differently than what they are today, along with different expectations. For instance, if you had a 100-degree day and the AC was able to provide 85 degrees of cooling for the home, folks were generally pretty ecstatic, because many folks grew up without AC, and have any amount of all was amazing. So if we fast forward today, most folks are looking for better temperature and humidity control, aka 85 degrees simply isn't cutting it anymore. And back in the 90s and 2000s, when it came time to change out the system, many contractors ended up upsizing the equipment but not addressing the ductwork. So there's a chance that the ductwork could be a full ton undersized. And with efficiency advancements in the equipment, it can no longer power through this extra load. So the issue that this creates is that the older the home or ductwork, the bigger the difference is in technology and comfort standards. So when dealing with ductwork that's 30, 40, 50 years old, you have to keep this in mind. So when it comes to something like metal ductwork, this is going to be the main factor on its life expectancy. And that's because metal ductwork is hard to modify. So it might have a super long life, but it's still subject to technology and comfort standards. The next thing is, how do you keep your ductwork as clean as possible? Well, you're going to want to make sure that your ductwork stays sealed, especially on the return side, along with routinely changing your filters. Because we don't want dust and dirt continuously being ran through your ducts, because at some point it's going to make your ducts so gross that you're probably just going to want to replace them. So what's my overall summary and conclusion on these 3 ductwork types? So when it comes to life expectancy, we can see that flex ductwork can last upwards to 30 to 40 years. Ductboard, you might be able to push it as far as 50 years, and metal ductwork can pretty much last forever. However, with ductboard and metal, a lot of times it won't make it to its full life potential due to the new equipment, current HVAC standards, cleanliness, and sizing. So when it comes to ductwork designing, flex is fairly easy to design out, ductboard is moderately difficult, and metal is difficult to design out, because there's not a whole lot of wiggle room when it comes to the installation. We can see that the technician to install flex does need to be fairly skilled. When it comes to ductboard, they need to be very skilled, and for metal, they need to be at the top of their game. For maintenance over the years, flex is going to have some upkeep, ductboard and metal is going to have little upkeep. When it comes to cost, flex is going to be the cheapest, ductboard is going to be about double the price, and metal is about 3 times the price. So the overall pros for flex is that it's cheaper, it's easier to design and install. The cons is it doesn't last as long as the others and requires a little more upkeep. When it comes to ductboard, it does have a longer life than flex. However, it is more expensive and requires more attention to design and craftsmanship. When it comes to metal, it can last for a really long time. It's essentially commercial grade ductwork and is great for people who are sensitive to allergies and pets because you can have it cleaned on a routine basis without damaging anything. Now, metal is going to end up costing 3 to 4 times as much as flex ductwork. You have to pay a huge amount of attention to the design and workmanship, along with keeping an eye on the insulation wrap.
If you found this video to be helpful, please hit the like button. We also have free buyer's guides and price lists on our website that you might want to check out. Until next time, have a good one.